Right now to the climate and energy wars that have been raging for the past 2 decades, and they're going to now be turbocharged by the second coming of Donald Trump as US president. The US is the world's largest economy, the world's second largest emitter, and the incoming president has made two key pledges. First, to restore America's dominance in fossil fuels under the slogan, "Drill, baby, drill." And second, to again pull out of the Paris Climate Accords, as it did last time when he was president. Now, whatever your views on climate change, what America says and what America does has a huge bearing, not just on the world's emissions trajectory, but on global energy security as well. Trump has repeatedly said that man-made climate change is largely a hoax, and he's just announced the entrepreneur Chris Wright as his pick for Energy Secretary in his new cabinet. Wright said last year, and I quote, "There is no climate crisis, and we are not in the midst of an energy transition either." Now, he's correct on this score at least, that outside the developed world, no country is turning their economy upside down in order to reduce emissions. And now the US is about to rejoin China, India, Indonesia, and all the other countries that have put economic and strategic strength ahead of climate posturing by abandoning any hard emissions commitments. Of course, Beijing is happy enough to demand that others cut their emissions, but will do nothing on its own to cut its emissions as it continues to claim developing nation status. And in a cunning geopolitical play, Beijing's also happy to demand a multi-trillion-dollar climate slush fund because a fund like this weakens the West. And while Beijing has its eyes wide open, the one person who can't see through all this posturing and doesn't seem to have noticed that things have changed is our own Prime Minister. Over the weekend at the APEC summit in Peru, he told the gathering that Australia is, quote, "a future renewable energy superpower," as if other countries don't have sun or wind. Nothing, it would seem, will deflect Anthony Albanese from the economic self-harm inherent in Labor's energy policy, which is driving up everyone's cost of living, driving our heavy industries offshore where power's cheaper, and making us ever more dependent on China, which is the source of around 80% of the world's solar panels and wind turbines. Speaking at the APEC leaders' retreat, the Prime Minister said more solar, wind and green hydrogen is essential for us to deal with the threat that climate change poses to our environment, our farmers, our forests, our oceans and rivers, and our future food security. Now, this is just alarmist nonsense. Many farmers think that the biggest threat to them is the environmental devastation wrought by the masses of wind turbines and solar panels now devastating prime agricultural land and our once pristine national parks. And hasn't the PM noticed that everyone from Twiggy Forest down is withdrawing from green hydrogen because it's turned out to be little more than an expensive pipe dream? But it's not just the Albanese government that's increasingly out of step with other countries. It's out of step too with advice it's getting from experts here. Even the head of the energy market operator says that gas is essential to make renewables work. Today, the head of one of our biggest miners, Glencore's Gary Nagle, said Australia's attitude to coal was out of step with the rest of the world. Outside of Australia, he said, stakeholders are generally more willing to have a conversation about coal. The transition's not going to happen overnight, and many countries have accepted coal as a shorter-term transition fuel. As well, the head of Origin Energy, one of our biggest power suppliers, has today said that Australia is underprepared for a future without coal. Frank Calabria says that difficult decisions are being made too late or put in the too hard basket. Well, that's for sure. This government's energy policy is a slow-motion train wreck, and ministers from the Prime Minister down are too pig-headed to admit that we're in deep trouble, and they're just praying they can get through the looming election before Australia wakes up.